There are 3 categories of UFO sightings, according to Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who investigated UFOs in an official capacity. He was a scientific advisor to Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book ran from 47 to 69, someplace 70, but they announced its closing in 69. They investigated 12,000. This is the United States Air Force. They investigated 12,618 cases, out of which 701 remained unidentified. And remind me about that number. I'll explain the relevancy with that number to the report that came out yesterday on the Hill. Okay. So that's a very stubborn small percent. So Dr. Hynek broke them down into 3 categories. Close encounters of the first kind. It's when someone claims to see a UFO. Close encounter of the second kind. They see a UFO and somehow this UFO interacts with the environment, whether it leaves a burnt mark on the ground or the radiation affects someone's face within certain proximity, burns soil samples, leaves, trees, bushes, whatever. That's close encounter of the second kind.
Okay.
Close encounter of the third kind is when the witness reports, allegedly, beings, entities associated with the UFO. That's close encounter of the third kind. So the phenomenon, for the first time in all the films that I'd ever made, dealt with close encounters of the third kind. Alleged beings. And it's very different between objects in the sky and beings on the ground.
Yeah.
It was a big, big difference, right? Because you can talk about Russia or China all you want, but when you're talking about beings on the ground, that's just a game changer. I'm going to get to the relevance of what the close encounters of the first, second, and third kind. So all the history I'd done, I did 50 Years of Denial, which I sold to Discovery. I did Out of the Blue version 1, Out of the Blue version 2. I did I Know What I Saw. I'd never, ever dealt with close encounters of the third kind, where the witness report seeing beings associated with the craft, okay? I felt it was like a slippery slope, and boy, it's kind of a difficult one to kind of swallow.
Yeah.
With the phenomenon, I went for it. And honestly, I was terrified because I had high-level government and intelligence officers in the film, several of which, including the former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, refused to sign a release form until they got to see the movie.
Oh.
Wow. I don't blame them.
Right.
So I got a movie that starts in Alabama in the 50s and it ends in Africa of an alleged landing of a UFO, multiple UFOs, and the occupants getting out in broad daylight with 100 witnesses and interacting telepathically with these witnesses. That's just nuts, right? I mean, come on. Like, I thought the Harry Reids and the Podestas and all the other intelligence people that are in my movie, the New York Times, like, take us out of the movie. I was terrified. Mm-hmm. Nobody had ever done with the mainstream reporting with all that and dealt with alleged close encounters of the third kind. That's just such a game changer, because you can no longer like talk about whether it's Russia or whether it's a drone or whether we're talking beings,
right? And
these beings look very different than a human, right? In fact, if you want, I've got some illustrations I could show you.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely get into that.
But anyway, my point is that that was the first film, The Phenomenon, where I broke through to a much broader mainstream audience. And not only that, but we reported on very compelling close encounters of the third kind.
Yeah, the stigma, when you talk about the stigma associated with just UFO sightings or encounters of the first and the second kind,
right?
It's definitely been largely erased by the New York Times article.
For sure.
There's obviously still a lot of it when it comes to actual creatures or beings being reported. To you, actually, before we get into that, let's talk about the
Hill.
The Hill, yeah, the latest news that just came out yesterday regarding the Hill. And I also want to ask about what you know about the new bill that was passed to protect whistleblowers. Maybe you can find it. We'll talk about that after, but it's a new bill that was passed to protect whistleblowers of private organizations that are working on some of these secret programs. For example, in Lockheed Martin or Raytheon, whatever it might be.
They've been talking about basically giving people immunity that can come forward and share government secrets without fear of prosecution because of violation of National Security Act, I think it is. But backing up for a moment. So I read the article that came out, I think it was yesterday, in The Hill, Vice, and I thought I interpreted it fairly well. But then I reached out to Lou Elizondo, who ran the ATIP program at the Pentagon, just to be sure, because we go back, we text things back and forth, and I share stuff with him and vice versa.
So he was, for people who don't know who he is, he was the head of the ATIP program.
So it was Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. It was the program at the Pentagon, the secret UFO program that ended up on the front page of the New York Times. And you see all the little UFOs that came out with it. So let me read you the text that he sent me.
Yeah.
Because, and I'll explain this. Okay, for the first time in recent history, our Congress is focusing on UFOs in a non-prosaic manner, meaning if it turns out that a particular incident, a product of man-made process or technology, then the UAP JPO, I have to look up what the JPO is, will not continue to study it. Only those phenomena that fall outside the category and are truly anomalous will be focused. So basically what he's saying is you got a select committee, right? And they're saying, I talked earlier about the 701 cases that ended up in the unidentified category that were investigated from the Air Force,
right?
Out of 12,618.
Yeah.
So that's that very stubborn small percentage of cases. So what the select committee is saying, we're only going to look at stuff that's non-human. All the other stuff we have no interest in investigating. So by them saying that, they're admitting that a small percentage of UFO, we're not trying to find out if all UFOs are of extraterrestrial origin, right? It's are any of them, because it only takes one or two, right? So they're saying we're only interested in that core 10 or 15% of truly unidentifiable cases, like the non-human cases. So it's basically them saying, without directly saying, that a small percentage of UFOs are not of earthly origin or are not of human, you know, are not man-made.
And they changed it to where they're now talking about being transmedium, to where they're like they're aerospace and submersible. Yeah,
they can go
crafts.
They can operate in outer space. They can operate in the atmosphere, and they can operate underwater, and they can do all three simultaneously.